Welcome, everyone, to our VWEC Metaverse Expert Series. And for those of you that are new, our website is vweconsortium.org. And you can find VWEC on many social media channels right here in the local chat. There's a link tree with many of them. After our presentation, we will move to the deck for a social time for anyone who wants to stay for more conversation. If you need the live stream link today, for closed caption, it's right here in the local chat on YouTube. I am happy to introduce our Metaverse expert speaker to you today, Friday, May 24th, 2024. Bruce Wolcott is currently a co-founder and faculty lead for the Bellevue College XR Lab. The XR Lab is committed to the exploration of spatial computing technologies for teaching and learning, and they've been in operation for 7 years. He has a 25-year teaching history with Bellevue College in digital media arts and communication studies. And prior to his teaching career, Bruce was a commercial optical effects photographer, as well as media production coordinator at the Pacific Science Center in Seattle, Washington. He has a BA in Multimedia and Perceptual Design, as well as a certificate in Virtual Worlds Education from the University of Washington School of Information. And several of us here were also participants in that program. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will turn the mic over to Bruce as we hear about the BC XR Lab introduction and NSF mini grant overview. Bruce, over to you.
Oh, thanks a lot, Val. Thanks for the nice introduction. And it's nice to see all of you here joining in. And I will be covering a fair amount of territory today, but hopefully this will be, I found some content here that'll be of interest to everyone. Zinnia, it's nice to see you here as well. I haven't talked with you for a long time, so nice to see you in the audience. So today I'm going to be, I'm going to switch my screen here. Stand by 1 second, I'll be right with you. Need to look at the screen. So a little bit about where I'm coming from and what my interests are and what my background is. I'm currently teaching at Bellevue College, which is located just east across Lake Washington from Seattle. There's an image of the campus itself on the lower left-hand corner there. As Val says, I have described, I've been teaching there now for 25 years. It sounds incredible, it's been that long. But I've been teaching in communication studies and digital media arts, starting with the early internet, moving into the later internet and virtual visual storytelling, technologies of persuasion and propaganda, a variety of different courses related to information theory, media theory, and information theory. And I've wound up inevitably in the whole realm of virtual reality and virtual worlds. And so my work at Bellevue College has really been involved pretty much for the past 25 years in this realm. As Val mentioned, I am currently an instructor at Bellevue College. I continue to teach in communication studies, but my main role and the one that occupies most of my attention right now is working at the XR Lab. My address is at the bottom there, bwolcott@bellevuecollege.edu, and if you want to get in touch with me to find out some more information or just have a general question, please feel free to send me an email and I'll get back to you. So I want to just talk a little bit. Maybe you heard part of the conversation I had with Val. We met each other about 10 or 12 years ago in a program at the University of Washington Information School called, it was in Virtual Worlds. Prior to that, I was involved, I got interested in virtual reality back in the 1990s You can see, normally I have this set up as a progressive reveal, but apparently the slide presentation can only, work with stills, so that's fine. On the lower left-hand corner, you'll see a virtual world that was developed with a grade school. I was working with a couple of instructors and some students in program, a virtual worlds program called Worlds Inc. And they developed a virtual worlds environment online that was called Alpha World, and they had an educational program. So I had an experiment with that there and found out that once you build a world, you need to have something happening or people will very quickly lose interest. So having a live, active social community is really an important part of virtual worlds and social worlds. Up in the upper right-hand corner was the Museum of Virtual Media, which was at the University of Washington Information School. And again, in the lower right-hand corner, my interest there was the fact that we had a group of about 20 people who were collaborating, problem solving, working on the project, which was the Museum of Virtual Media. And you can see a group of us talking to the graphic designer who's introducing what our color scheme will be for the museum. So that's a little bit of background. And then more recently, starting 7 years ago, I want to back up a little bit. This next section is I'm going to be talking about the XR Lab itself, and I want to present this material as a lead into talking about the grant because the infrastructure that we've developed for the lab was a necessary component of and development before we could successfully apply for a grant. Having this infrastructure in place was important for that. So today I'm going to be looking at the BCXR Lab, our history, what we currently do, how we built an infrastructure, both physical and social for that, how the NSF grant came about and the story about that, our project launch, which was just in October, and what's happened subsequently to that. And then we'll be open for some questions and answers afterwards. So here's the lab itself. The lab got its start. I had an interesting working relationship with a fellow named James Riggle, who's at University of Tasmania, in Tasmania, Launceston. He and I team taught a course, long distance course called The Fundamentals of Interactive Entertainment. Make a long story short, James and I share an interest in virtual reality, and I was able to get him to Bellevue College with some help from administrators on a Fulbright scholarship. And so when he arrived in fall of 2017, he and I were thinking what would be a good project for us, and that's where the XR Lab was, the idea was created. This is what the lab looks like now. We have a main classroom in the back. We have a suite of offices for different kinds of projects that we're working on. And we have been able to stay afloat and be successful since 2017. So I've got my fingers crossed that that continues, and so far so good. So I'm happy about that. So many of you deal with this. I'm sure you've been looking for ways to describe what the work is that you do in the different formats. And this is the general vocabulary we use, and you may be familiar with this, but I just wanted to quickly touch on this. We're currently working with immersive virtual reality experiences and with augmented reality experiences. And we do some work with 360 visuals as well and video, which falls under this term XR. XR, from our standpoint, stands for extended reality. It's this idea that these are technologies that expand, enhance, augment human capabilities and potential. I've become quite enamored with the term spatial computing, which is being used more frequently. That's a nice encompassing term. we're in a spatial computing environment here. We don't necessarily have to have headsets. We could be here on a smartphone or a flat screen. And so I think spatial computing is a nice term. XR implies that you have to have a headset, even though that's not the case. The other thing that we talked about before, too, is that the artificial intelligence, I think, falls under the umbrella of XR as well, in terms of extended reality and bringing AI within these shared social and learning spaces. That's the perspective that we're coming into this now with the evolution of these new AI systems and programs. So our goals are these. Our primary directive is that we're using these technologies for teaching and learning. So consequently, we at Bellevue College, we're looking for active student and faculty involvement. We're also looking for what we're doing here, which is cross-disciplinary and institutional networking, cross-disciplinary within the school, Bellevue College itself, among departments, institutional networking where we can connect with schools and programs beyond the walls and confine of Bellevue College. I heard a term which is really interesting related to this, or an expression, which is that as we're entering VR and using these tools, we can look at the entire world as a classroom. And I think that's a valuable concept or idea as we move ahead, that we now have access to the world's knowledge that can be brought to bear within local situations, and the technologies enable that. So we have a number of industry folks that we work with, so that are what we teach at Bellevue College through the XR Lab is current, that we're not relying on information that was developed years ago. So we have members of industry who work with us regularly. And we're also involved with developing XR-related curricula with faculty. Oops. So here's our crew. Currently, this is spring 2024. I won't list all their names here, but I think it's interesting to note that many of our students are international. Valon, for example, is from Congo. Berke is from Turkey. Ong is from Myanmar. Raji is a faculty member who's from India. Maria, we'll bring up a little bit later, is from Bogota, Colombia, and we have regular projects that we do with her as well. Drew is new. He's just our new coordinator. Ron also co-manages with me. The fellow down in the lower left-hand corner just to the right is James, who's the fellow from Tasmania I was talking about. So this is the crew that we work with, and we have a very kind of flexible working system, which has to be that way because all of us are on very different schedules. So one of the challenges that we had right from the very beginning was, what do we do? What is the XR Lab? What is our function? We started with 2 headsets and a computer, and we didn't have a space. We were working with e-learning, so we were really starting with a blank slate. And over time, we've come to define ourselves more clearly. I would say we're still in growth mode. There's parts of what we do now that we're experimenting with. We don't have a definition for exactly some of the things that we do right now, but we're moving in that direction. So teaching is one of the main functions. We sponsor events. We have a number of projects. We have outreach like we're doing now, and we also work with schools and other institutions in the Seattle area. We're also developing an archive and a resource space for XR. Okay, so this is, over the left is what the XR Lab looked like. We are located in the library, by the way, which was an important step. The XR, we wanted the XR to be topic neutral because it can be used in any number of different disciplines. So being in the library was a very important step for us, so that students coming in all have access to the technology. It's not restricted to being under computer science or under art or under business. It's really an agnostic approach to access to this technology. We have a variety of apps that we use that are already pre-built that we make use of. Also, we host a number of different kinds of projects involving faculty and students. And I'm going to talk about a few of those as we move forward here. These are some interesting ones. Ron Austin was working with a fellow who was a pilot, B-17 pilot during the Second World War. He's now 102 years old. And so we documented, part of this was a documentary of his experiences during the Second World War. Another part of that was that there's a VR program which recreates a mission over Europe in this case, it was by the BBC. It was with a British bomber during the Second World War. And you're actually feels like you're physically there. And so he went through that experience. And we thought it would be interesting to find out what the real experience was compared with the virtual ones. And the obvious one was that he said, well, the virtual experience, it feels very real that you're there, present there, but there's no fear because you're not going to be killed. So, and then we've had sculpture projects, anatomy projects, remote lectures. Gina lives in Sequim, Washington. That's where she teaches from. And she was able to create lectures using a VR program. Wei Geiger does Chinese culture and language. And she developed an virtual environment for teaching that topic in that range. Here is Wei Geiger's language and culture virtual classroom with a whiteboard and a video screen there. And she wasn't using this for the entire quarter. This was more like bringing her students in for an experience outside the normal lecture format. And so as a way to sort of enhance her teaching, she made use of this environment that was built using Mozilla hubs. Here's the Dick Gnome's project. It was a walkthrough museum exhibit. Here are the students who are working on a project for a global health, international global health management program, where they recreated a virtual Bangladesh market. And the idea there was how do different environments and locations and cultures make themselves potentially vulnerable to different kinds of diseases and health situations. And Bangladesh was used as an example of that for the class, a walkthrough. So the instructor had a variety of videos and images that were being used to tell that story. We've also had immersive, this was a live session in VR where all the students actually did arrive within a VR headset from their own homes, and then gave their presentations on capstone projects within VR. We've had a series of events. In this case, Google Earth was used. That's Dr. Paul Jackson, who's done historic study of the Central District in Seattle and recorded different events and photos in different locations within Seattle, and then did a guided tour of the Central District in Seattle and some key moments and locations in Black history in Seattle. So that was flat screen, right? This was not an immersive environment, but again, this falls under XR. This was developed by Sage Freeman in Kemeketa Community College in Salem, Oregon. He built a virtual environment for bringing in classes and separating them out into different groups like you do in Zoom. So we do have a visiting scholar program. I mentioned James Riggle. He's there in the classroom, and he brings with him a background in entrepreneurship and startups. He teaches that at the University of Tasmania and to students in China. And he's very familiar with that territory, and he brought that culture into the XR Lab, which has been really valuable for us. It made us like a hybrid between an entrepreneurial endeavor and an academic one. And having that business perspective along with an academic one has been really an important part of how our culture has evolved. We also have different kind of visiting scholar. DeGratia Daniels is located in Atlanta, Georgia. So he came in to consult students in VR, in building VR environments, and worked with Raji, one of our instructors, who was working on a program in Canvas in VR. So some of the areas that we're looking at currently right now is we love this idea of having these shared virtual environments that are real time, that are spatial. And in this case, we're looking at a couple of instructors who are looking at a crime scene simulation. One is an anthropologist, the other is as a communications instructor. And they want to take a look at crime scenes. The one instructor wants to look at a crime scene from the standpoint of a communications situation where you have a division of labor and different kinds of specialties are brought together in a group collaborative process. The anthropologist is looking at the crime scene from a forensic standpoint. So we're right in the midst of developing that project probably this summer. Just very quickly, we had another program. This was a grant that was provided for one of the instructors who teaches our overseas programs. We took a trip to France, made 360 stills of different locations, and annotated them with images and videos. The idea that additional students will be coming not this summer, but next summer to do their own documented journey of, in this case, Normandy. We did a virtual mock-up of that using AI tools. And this leads us to to the grant. And so I wanted to give you a sense of what the XR Lab has been, where we've evolved, and how then we went about getting the grant to develop, in part, the Northwest XR EDU network. This idea is we have been in collaboration and connection with other networks and schools, but this gives us an opportunity to do this in earnest with some funding behind it. Okay, so I want to talk about the grant, and I know this is an area of interest to you, and I hope that wasn't too long an introduction to this, but I did want to give you a sense of the foundation that was there when we applied for the grant. The first thing is the NSF grant, we started in 2023, and we submitted the first year. It was rejected, but we had feedback from it. We submitted the next year. We made the improvements, but again, we got feedback that wasn't accepted a second time. Then we applied a third time. We adjusted the grant award, I think, from 800,000 to 780,000, and we got the award the third time. And I think the difference was initially we had a focus on equipment acquisition and developing kind of our physical location within Bellevue College. It changed then to become so that we began to look at this idea of networking and connecting with other schools and providing grant stipends for different schools to work on their own projects that we could then share with each other through an open educational resource environment. So there are two different missions for this NSF grant, and I am going to go ahead and post a link to a document that, let me see if I can find it. It was, I think, 2019. 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 It was, I to a document that will save you from having to look at the full 50 to 60 pages of the original version of the grant. So this is a distilled version in PDF form. And I will go over the salient features of it, and then if you want to look at it more in detail on your own, that would be great. So there are two primary missions. We have a teaching program and a design studio, and then we have the Northwest EDU network and the OER, Open Educational Resource curricula that is being developed along with that. So this is what it looks like. And again, this was a distilled version. This is the boiled down, distilled version of what the grant is about. First of all, we have two tracks. And so the first track, DMA, stands for Digital Media Arts. It's the Digital Media Arts program. The focus for them is to create a back-end development class in VR using Unity, so that students learn how to actually build, from a technical standpoint, virtual worlds environments. And in order to do that, you'll see that the arrow points down to the design lab. We have a design lab that's equipped with 12 high-end computers that will support student work coming from digital media arts. In the bottom track, we have the XR EDU network, which is the XR Lab on the far left. And then there's the EDU network, which is this gathering of different schools and institutions who have written proposals for various projects that they're working on. We'll be having 3 rounds of grant funding, and the grants are $1,000, so they're not like a huge amount, but they provide seed money for getting involved with a variety of different XR related projects and programs at different schools. Our goal for the first round was to get 10 proposals. And what we ended up was we have 30 proposals that were submitted, and we had to whittle that down to 10 for the first round. And we'll have another round that's coming up in the fall. And those of you who are interested in being involved with that, you're welcome to apply. And I'm going to what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the mailing list, link to the mailing list. And if you want to find out more information, I can, if you send an email to sign up for the mailing list, I can send you more information about that without getting too much into the weeds right now. So the process for building the grant was important. First of all, if I was doing this on my own, I couldn't have done it for an NSF grant. There is just too much. There's too much territory that needs to be covered using the right language, using the right approach, understanding what different granting agencies require and expect in a grant. And if you don't have all the T's crossed and I's dotted, you can be turned down for what would seem to be fairly minor things, but they're not. And so the big secret sauce for us was being able to, while we were participating in developing certain parts of the grant, we were under the guidance and leadership of the grants office at Bellevue College. And so having someone, in this case, it was 2 individuals who are working with us to review the materials that we're doing, to reorganize ideas, to make them palatable to the NSF. And that piece was absolutely essential. It's a whole area of expertise into itself when we're going after a large grant like that. And so all I can do is thank Brandon for his heroic efforts in pulling this together, not once, but 3 separate times. The other thing that Brandon said is that if generally on the larger grants like this, it's very common for them to be rejected twice, and that the 3rd time's a charm. And that's what happened with us. So he said if we didn't get it a third time, then we could probably have just forgotten about it, that it probably wouldn't be worth pursuing for a fourth time. So it was a multidisciplinary team. We had members of the XR Lab that were involved. We had the grants office. We had input from administrators at Bellevue College. We had input from some of our industry partners in terms of what current circumstances are technology-wise. So we had brainstorming sessions where we met and made our own contributions, and the heavy lifting then was done by the grants office, as I mentioned before. Another important part of the grant was getting letters of support. We probably had, it was between 15 and 20 letters of support, both from academic sources and from industry sources, providing support for the plan and indicating how they will be willing to support the grant once it gets off the ground. And then we did have an existing network of, I'm thinking specifically of Sage and Monica, who are in Oregon, and they put their shoulder behind this as well. We had an existing informal information network going, and they were able to give their additional support, saying that we want to continue this. And then, as I mentioned before, James Riggle had his contribution from a startup standpoint, and this kind of business entrepreneurial perspective was invaluable for establishing a framework for the XR Lab and the direction that we're going in. So our future plans are these. This is what we're working on right now, is we want to fulfill the requirements of the NSF grant. We have 3 years to do that. We just got started in October, so we're into this about halfway through our first year. We are looking for cross-disciplinary collaboration with different departments within the school, but also different departments and XR interested programs in different schools. We're going to be expanding our lab space for XR creation at the school, and part of this will be working on projects for Bellevue College, and potentially we can work on projects that are proposed outside Bellevue College as well. But this lab space hasn't been set up yet, so that's something we're going to be looking at in the future. Another important part of this is that we're looking at XR-based resources and a curricula. What will be the most valuable apps to use when you're teaching XR? What are the current industry standards? It's basically the discoveries that are made by different schools and participants in the network will be translated into open educational resources that will be available to everyone. So we are also promoting XR technology for teaching and learning at the school, but elsewhere as well. And a main initiative for us is, like it is here at the VWEC, we want to build a robust network community of like-interested educators and people involved with various kinds of teaching and learning using spatial computing. Okay, this was a lot of territory to throw in your direction. This is some contact information. The XR Lab, you can find out more information by going to this XR Lab address. I think I sent up the network sign up. Also, I wanted to include some project examples that we've been working on over the past couple of years. That's this next link that I put into chat. And I wanted to close by my presentation part, and then we can go into Q&A. I wanted to show a video. It runs under 4 minutes, and basically what this shows is some of the current work that we're doing at the XR Lab, directions that we're going right now. we're working with a program called Shapes XR, which gives us the opportunity of creating these immersive shared spaces and collaborating over distances. And I wanted to post this video, and if you have a chance to click on it and view it, I believe the process for this, Val, is that once everyone has seen it, they just type in a D into the chat. Is that correct?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay. So it's kind of fun, and let me explain a little bit what's happening here. Maria is in Colombia, Bogota. I'm at the XR Lab. I'm in a pass-through environment there where she is demonstrating some work that she's done making use of artificial intelligence tools. And she's basically doing prompts to create 3D objects within that virtual world, a variety of different 3D events and objects within the world. That's the first part. And then the second part is an exhibit space based on scanned objects, again, in a pass-through location within the lab multimedia theater. So if you could take a look at it, that would be great. And then I just wanted to give you an idea of some of the work that we're doing now.
Hi, Ron and Drew. This is Maria, and I'm here with Bruce. We both work for the XR Lab at Bellevue College, but I'm in Colombia while Bruce joins me remotely from Seattle for this recording.
Yes, hi everyone. This is Bruce. You can see my controllers here. Maria, can you take us on a tour of your AI augmented virtual space here, which is located in the XR Lab lobby?
Of course, this space was created in Shapes XR, that is a collaborative VR modeling application designed for users to share a virtual space, interact with each other like we are doing right now, and also access shared models in real time. For this prototype, we focus on creating assets using different AI 3D tools, like text to 3D textures, text to voice, text to 3D models, and text to 360 panoramas. For example, here on my right, you can see how I create a 3D model with a picture as a reference. I also have another example where I create this model, but this time using an image generated with AI. So you can see how all these tools can help in the creation of assets for XR experiences. But AI can also enhance XR experience by adding immersion and personalization, creating more dynamic and responsive environments.
Maria, I noticed over to the right here, there's a large photosphere which you can actually walk into. Looks like a wraparound that you can use in 3D environments to provide an environmental setting. Is that correct?
Yes, in fact, everything, all the 3D models that you see on this room are generated with AI. This one specifically was created with a text prompt, and then you can create different 360 panoramas with different styles.
Well, thank you, Maria, for this quick tour of this AI supplemented virtual environment. We're going to change gears here, and I'm going to move into an exhibit space that was created by Reza Foro's anatomy class students, where they created various organs of the body using plaster, clay, plastic, a variety of different materials. They were scanned, and then we put them on exhibit. So I'm going to move over to that space now, Maria, but I want to thank you for this great tour of yours.
Sounds good, Bruce. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, to follow up with Maria's tour of an immersive virtual space integrated with artificial intelligence, I'm now moving into a separate augmented reality exhibit space that has an interesting story behind it. Bellevue College's faculty member Reza Foro teaches an anatomy class where students handcraft different organs of the body using clay, styrofoam, plastic, and other materials. Reza is concerned that these projects, which take students a long time to build, should be preserved for future groups rather than forgotten or tossed out. So we had the idea of scanning these projects in 3D using an iPhone with a scanning technology called LiDAR, We then brought the scanned 3D objects into Shapes XR, where we were able to scale, annotate, and position them in our classroom space. So back to you, Ron and Drew.
What an amazing video, Bruce.
This was just hot off the presses. We were at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and Maria, who you saw, is just this spectacular media designer and a great person to work with. And I just thought it was really interesting that it felt so much like a normal conversation, and she was bringing in these as she was speaking, bringing in these different 3D objects and experiences into this communication space, and from such a long distance away. And we're doing the same thing here, right? It's quite miraculous. We take it for granted. But this, the thing that for me, that made this really quite interesting is just that it's an immersive walkthrough type of space. This was true of the exhibit area too. All of those models were based on hand-built organs of the body that were made from plaster and clay and plastic, and they were hand painted. And then we scanned them, and then we could bring them into that exhibit space and walk through it. You can walk around all those, and they're sharp. You look up at those objects up close, and they're really tack sharp. And so I found it really quite interesting.
Absolutely. And I mean, thank you for sharing so many great examples of teaching and learning in the metaverse through XR and spatial computing. Are you ready for us to ask you some questions?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And it's nice to see everybody. I have my camera pointed out towards everyone, and so I can see everyone's names and where you're sitting and all that.
Excellent. Well, I'll go first because as you were showing all of these cutting edge new tools in your XR lab, it made me think within XR, where do virtual worlds like Second Life fit? Is this, what I call desktop VR? You mentioned spatial computing with no headset absolutely needed. Will virtual worlds like Second Life still be useful in the future, in your opinion?
Oh, for sure. I just see this as a spectrum. Some people there'll be some situations which will be more appropriate for the kind of immersive experiences or augmented reality experiences like we just saw. And then there are situations like this one where you're gathering a lot of people together. They're coming from different locations. There's a long history of social interaction and world building within Second Life. It may be flat screen, but it's still a virtual spatial environment. So this is on the spectrum of virtual worlds. And I like the fact that the exploders are actually documenting the different worlds and their applications. But I just see this as Second Life is going to continue because of its value, its continued value. And we'll see which is going to be accepted in terms of these more immersive environments, if there's going to be enough value there, or maybe people won't see value. We'll find that out over time.
Exactly. And I think the VR Explorer Club, that's the idea, is to just explore, what is evolving. I did notice that you talked about Mozilla Hubs, which is closing, and some of these other spaces where you've built. Here's another question. What tools do your students use to build, such as Unity or Unreal Engine? Are there any particular 3D tools they use to build and import their assets?
Well, there's two different levels of VR. If we're talking about Unity, or we're talking about the Unreal Editor, those are really high-end editing tools, and those are useful for students who want to pursue a career doing back-end VR development work. If you're in a situation like Second Life, where you have your own tools, building tools that are available, you can get into the programming end here, but a lot of the work can just be done using the built-in tools in Second Life. This is true for the other apps we've been working with. Altspace VR had a lot of great building tools. Mozilla Hubs did too. We're now moving towards spatial I/O for some development work. We had a group of high school students developing an AIDS, HIV exhibit space for their high school project using spatial. I want to post there's a program called Curio XR, which we just discovered a few weeks ago. And Curio is funded by the U.S. Department of Education. They have, I believe it's a $3 million grant. These are really high-end developers who are working on this, but they're working for schools. They're looking for proposals of different things that can be built and that would be useful. So they're just getting started, and this potentially is a development platform for people who want to develop a curriculum and have it within VR. And their VR is without controllers. You use your hand and fingers, and you push a button on your arm to call up menus and all that kind of stuff. And so this is something that we're looking at closely, because if we are looking at immersive VR versus flat screen VR, there are some possibilities emerging from there that we haven't had before.
Excellent. And when you showed those models that were then scanned and put into an immersive VR, as a librarian, the first thing I thought of was, what about archival of virtual assets? As these platforms come and go, do you think that archival and sustainability is important? One of the things we love about Second Life is that it's persistent and you can come back again and again and it's still here. What about persistence and and sustainability and archival?
Yeah, that's what this open educational resource. I don't know. Everyone's coming from different locations. Washington State has through Washington State, the government has a location for open educational resources where faculty in different schools can create curricula, and then they can post them online, and then they're made available on an open source basis. And so we're looking to do the same thing with the curricula that are being developed by different schools. Part of the grant arrangement is that they would be willing to post their material on as open educational resources, as an open source resource. So that's where we're looking to as a permanent archive currently, to where the stuff can go. This work can go.
That is wonderful. And thanks for these great links. I will look at that later. The blog, great place to archive as well. I've always felt like machinima is, also a great way to archive, because sometimes builds do come and go. One thing that was fascinating is you're embedding AI as it's just rapidly, impacting education and society at large. This AI as part of XR, that's fascinating. But how do you feel about the future of AI bots versus human avatars? Will we need to distinguish between them so we know who's a real human being and who's an AI agent?
Well, there's the other piece to this, is that as we communicate and engage with AI, we're being involved. It's a feedback loop. So for example, the early video games where you go into a video game parlor where kids were playing Donkey Kong and Centipede and Missile Command and all those early programs. Excuse me. You could look at this as a feedback loop where the kids are putting the energy into the machine, they're feeding it back in terms of photons and sound, and it's a loop, it's an intelligence loop. And the latest generation of AI, many of you may have seen that demo of the equivalent of Her, where you talk to your phone and the AI talks with you just like another highly intelligent person. That's where the convergence between what's real and virtual is. This is a this is a big issue, right? And do we want to, I mean, this is an individual choice. How much of do we want to sort of become, engaged with forms of AI that are part of our intimate thinking process? I mean, we do this already with our phones. The smartphone is a form of AI. It does things in a very intelligent and helpful way. My sense is as people get used to these tools, they won't see them as an invading alien force like the Terminator, but it will be more like a helpful and positive part of their lives. And I think as virtual worlds evolved and communities evolve in virtual worlds, we'll see this influence of AI happening in a similar way.
Yes, and it's a huge, huge topic in itself. But I just loved that you mentioned that the XR Lab is in the library and that it's interdisciplinary. I kind of look at this as the library of the future, beyond books. And your project is both global and cross-curriculum. So do you have any simulations that can be visited? Or are they all closed to the public at this time? Do you have any goals to share a simulation that people might visit in the future?
Let me think. So I do have this French. Stand by one second. This was the project that I worked on with Li Lu. It's in Normandy, and it's 98% completed. This is a fairly recent one. So just sort of an explanation. This was a project that we were working on this past fall. This was funded through the Department of State. It was on norm. It was part of a class that will be going over to France in the summer of 2025. Okay, I'm going to paste this here, and hopefully this will work for everybody. I haven't tested it out, but I think this should probably do it. And so what this is it's working with a program called SeekBeak, and SeekBeak is not immersive. You can view this immersively, but it works much better, I think, as a flat screen experience. And this is the region of Normandy, France. And then if you click on any of the different locations there, it takes you to a 360 environment that has a narrative associated with it. And so we visited the Bayeux Tapestry in Bayeux, France, and we went to the Normandy Omaha Beach and D-Day. There was actually Saint Michel Abbey was one of the places we visited. And this was done as a precursor to bringing students over who will be creating and documenting their own version of a tour of Normandy. And I just see this as this idea that we can go from a bird's eye view down to local views and specific information. This idea of being able to go from macro to micro very quickly is definitely a spatial experience. And so it was quite intense going over there doing all this photography, but we wanted a proof of concept before we committed to bringing a group of students there. So that's one experience. That's the one that just stands out in my mind right now. Some of the others are more local to what we're doing at Bellevue College.
Excellent. Who else has a question for Bruce? Feel free to type it in the local chat if you choose, or feel free to speak out in voice.
So Kyoko said, I'm very interested in the Normandy VR map as I've been to several locations there. I'm curious, where were you in Normandy, Kyoko?
Well, I'm particularly interested in the Normandy VR map, because I've been to several locations there. I have seen Saint Michel from a distance. And actually, as a high schooler, I built, not a high school, maybe a college, I don't know, I can't remember, so long ago, uh, a working model of it, which with a lot of tin foil and some water, you know. And, because the thing is you can get there when the tide is out, but if you get caught there when the tide is come completely in, you're spending the night on Mont Saint Michel, so to speak. Anyway, that's really all I wanted to say. Oh, and I drank a whole lot of Cavados. I was old enough to do it.
Oh,
you know.
Saint Michel's very impressive, isn't it? Just the
Yeah,
scale
it
of
is.
that.
I didn't go. As I said, or I may have run up quickly and run back out, before the tide did its thing. I didn't want to spend the night on it. Although there's a good restaurant, Madame Poulard, I think, has a crepe restaurant up there. I don't know if she still has it there. She's probably 6 feet under right now. That was many years ago.
Yeah.
But
I think it's impressive. It's both a church and a fortress at the same time.
it's a church and a fortress and a restaurant.
And
I mean, that's full service.
yeah. Are there any questions about the grant itself? I had put out that PDF, which gives it condenses it's not an exciting read. Grants never are, right? But it gives you a distilled version of it, and hopefully that 3-page summary of the grant will be helpful. That's really the best kind of overview I could provide for the grant, because there's a lot to talk about, and I didn't want everyone's eyes to be glazing over in the middle of that.
Yes, it's very impressive that you kept trying for the third try, and that you were able to get this grant. I did see one question about the Normandy VR map from Tatiana. What are the projected plans for the Normandy project? Do you have continuing plans?
Yes. So we didn't want to go back to Normandy this summer because the Olympics are there. And it's also the 80th anniversary of the Omaha beach landings. So France and Normandy are going to be jam-packed with tourists. And so the plan is to take a group of students there in the summer of 2025. They will take a tour very similar to the one that you can see on the map there. And they will take their own 360 photos. They will be doing sketches. They will be taking photographs and videos and recording in their diaries and journals, and be telling the story of their experience there. And then they'll bring it back. They'll assemble their own version of it, probably using SeekBeak like we have here. Or a smaller group will be doing that. And then it will be presented, be put online, and people can view their experience there. It'll be a way of documenting their experience in Normandy. That's what the plan is.
Excellent. And we can continue with more questions, but it is the top of the hour, and I do have a quick little wrap up to say, and then we'll open this up more for further discussion. I know you have a lot on your minds from this amazing session with Bruce. You've given us a lot to think about, including how to share the evolving XR landscapes in the future. And we thank our audience, all of you, for being here with us today. So just as a reminder, you will be able to find a recording of today's presentation on the VWEC YouTube channel, which I'm putting in the local chat. And we will be having our next expert event on Friday, June the 14th at 1 p.m., kicking off our Summer of XR with Dragon Shichiroji. Here's a calendar. Yes, go ahead, Bruce.
Sorry. Oh, I just wanted to say I've just posted this link, which is the email sign up for the EDU network. If you're interested in just finding out more about what we do and what kinds of projects we have, I'd like to see us collaborating with VWEC. That seems like that would be a great plan, Val, if that's of interest
Yes.
to VWEC. It'd be fun to connect, build that relationship.
Yes, it would be simply amazing, especially with your developing curriculum that you've been talking about. We would love to hear examples of that in the future. What it is you're teaching and how you're teaching that through XR. Examples of it, embedding XR in teaching, because that's our goal. We share a common goal there. I did put a few more links just in the chat of our YouTube channel, and don't forget to bookmark Bruce's link to the sign up if you're interested in signing up with their education network, which I'm definitely interested in. And I believe I saw another question there. Oh, Tatiana was asking, she must have missed how this grant was funded. Can you say a little bit more about how it was funded?
How it was funded? Well, we applied to, it's a national, the most specific information I can give you now, because I don't have the specific address where we sent to, but it's the National Science Foundation, and it was, the category had to do with science education and technology education. It was in that broad general category. And there's a lot of competition for these grants, and there's a lot of preparation. And so it's really, as I mentioned before, if I was doing it on my own, I probably wouldn't have been able to successfully carry it off. Within a team and working with a grant team at the school, that really was very helpful, because they knew how to craft things to make it work.
Yes, great example of teamwork. And I think as these virtual environments evolve, teams and collaboration really on a global scale is the only way it's going to work, because you just can't do it alone. I would like to invite everybody to stand and walk over to the deck, where we like to do our close and our informal, continuing the conversation and discussion with Bruce. If you're willing to stay a little bit longer, Bruce, you all can follow me. We'll walk
that'll be
over
fun. Thank you.
this way.